Chapter 9 of Tales from Silver Lands. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Keith Gormley. Tales from Silver Lands by Charles Finger, Chapter 9, The 400. Singing and waving banners, the 400 youths with the twin brothers at their head, all of them slim and well-formed, brown of skin and straight of limb, marched forth to the land of the giants, their eyes bent on the far mountains, all wrapped in blue, floating mist. No faint hearts were there, nor among them were bullies or cowards, not one there but could run, leap, shoot straight, and look his friend in the eye. From shields of silver the sunlight flashed. Spearheads were like points of hard light, and each helmet was plumed. Bows were slung across shoulders, and swords were at sides, and sandaled feet marched in step. No food they bore, nor were they otherwise burdened. For well each knew the way of the forest and the trick of lake and stream. Well each knew the fruit-bearing trees and the bushes that were berry-hung, and at night their roof was the star-sprinkled sky. Straight as an arrow was their course to the west, to the land of vast rocks and gullies like axe-clefts in the earth. Straight to the west, not turning for swift-flowing stream nor yellow marsh, plunging through forest, climbing mountain, scaling cliff, straight to the west, to the place where the twin brothers had been before, until they came to the valley of Caicix, and saw his bones, already white, picked by carrion birds. There, too, they saw the caves where were heaps of glittering diamonds, rubies like fire, emeralds cool and green like caves of the sea. Gold, too, and silver were there, but no heed they gave to all that, counting such things but as toys for children, when great things had to be done. Scouting far and wide to hilltop and rocky ridge, going by twos in vast circles until they met again, they swept the land, seeing sign of neither Cabrakan nor of the giant Zipacna, and when the band met again, all were prepared to fare farther in their quest. None was returning, for, said they, there is an evil thing to put out of the land, and the swifter the foul task is done, the better. The second day of their quest they came to a great forest, and there they were set upon by great monkeys that came in hundreds and tens of hundreds, leaping at them and snarling, baring teeth and fiercely chattering. For a while it looked of ill omen, but knowing that together they could meet much, the 400 formed a square, so facing north and east and south and west, a line of lads kneeling with pointing spears, others behind them with spears over the shoulders of those that knelt. In vain the apes dashed at them, for not a spear was lowered, nor did heart grow faint. But the air throbbed with the cries of the hairy things, and they came in ever-increasing numbers, striving to break by sheer weight the spear-bristling square. All that day they came, hurling themselves against the square until the dead things lay in masses, those that were wounded screaming in pain and anger as they turned again to the forest. And when the dropping sun touched the hills and the green became black, the evil things, finding their work in vain, gave up the fight and fled snarling. So the 400, all unharmed, weary, though light of heart because of the great fellowship that was shown to be among them, shouldered their spears, reslung their bows, and marched on, until coming to a noisy stream they washed themselves and their weapons. Then in the white moonlight they slept, each with his sword at hand, while some watched, on guard, for that which might threaten. When the sky was rose-tinted again, they went on their way, making for a narrow pass, like a sword-slash in the mountains, and by noon they had reached the stony cut. High and bare were the white rocks on either side, and gloomy was the pass, nor of living thing was there a sign, save a condor wheeling high. But from the rocks came strange noises, whistlings and screamings, Then, of a sudden, like a thunderclap, a mighty roar as from many voices, and the noise of it echoed and re-echoed from rock to rock, so that the din was deafening, and when they spoke to one another, mouth went to ear and hands were cupped. Then, when they were all well within the pass, marching over a floor so covered with sharp-pointed rocks and great round boulders that they had to slacken their pace, there came from above a great rock which fell ahead of their path so as to block the way except for a narrow passage on either side. Looking up, they saw, crowded on the tops of the high cliffs on every hand, snag-toothed, evil-eyed fellows who crawled about the rocks as though they had been lizards, so sure of foot they were. They knew then that they were in the land of the wild men of the mountain, the crag men, fellows strong and stark, full of hate and viciousness. Of a sudden, from one of the creatures who stood far up in the cleft of a rock, one whose hair and beard were long and white and tangled, came a hoarse cry. Lifting high above his head a rock greater than 10 armadillos, he cast it downward with great force. Ill would it have been for any youth struck by it, but so badly and swiftly was it thrown that it passed over the heads of all, struck the wall on the farther side, and burst into 100 pieces. So the youth, with the bright eyes, called on his fellows to hold their shields above their heads, edge to edge and overlapping, in such wise as to form a roof, which they did. Well, it was thus, for stones rattled down like hail, some so great that those on whom they fell were almost borne to earth with the sheer weight, for the men of the crags were many and strong. Yet, the weight being shared by reason of the jointed shields, all went well, for each youth's care was for his fellow. In one place the pass ran narrow, and there one of the cragmen, a fellow of great animal strength and swiftness, suddenly leaped down and bore one of the twin brothers to earth by the violence of his flight through the air. For the men of the crags leaped from rock to rock like wildcats. It was Belanque who was thus struck down. But he was on his feet in an instant, drew his sword hastily, and as the cragman rushed at him with jaws all foam-flecked and horrible, he passed his blade through the cragman's chest. But the fellow was like a wild boar, pressing on regardless of the hurt, so that he ran up onto the hilt, caught the youth by the waist, and flung him over his shoulder. In a moment more he would have been on his way up the face of the cliff. As it was, seeing what had come to pass, the cragmen set up a great yelling and screaming, thinking that victory already lay with their man. But Bright Eyes was not idle. He fitted an arrow to his bow and let fly, the shaft passing through the cragman's neck, so that he stood, as it were, spitted, and let Belanque fall. Pierced though he was with both arrow and sword, yet there was life in him, and he fled to the rock face and clambered up, leaving a trail of red wherever he passed, and was seen no more by any of the band. No pause all this while was there in the shower of stones, but shields well locked, the band pressed on foot by foot, each youth stern to win and proud of his companion, each youth keeping the eye of hope on the thin, bright strip of blue at the end of the pass, where the mountains would fall away. And there they came at last, toil-worn but heart-strong, to the plain where the cragmen dared not follow, some of them almost weeping for joy, because shoulder to shoulder they had again fought their way through a great danger and an evil place, where, had but one failed, all might have been lost. There were 402 happy youths that night, though the place where they slept was bare of grass and trees, and in the morning they were well rested and strong, for as they had lived well and cleanly, and none having a darkened window in his breast, their sinews were as steel, and every day was a new life in which to enter with eyes bright and shining. The sun had not far risen. Indeed, there seemed but a hand's breadth between the lower edge of it and the world's edge, when a great wonder appeared before their eyes. It was as if the sun were suddenly blotted out, for what they had taken to be A low, faintly rising hill in the east had risen up, stood for a moment like a vast cloud, then passed swiftly to the south. At the same time there came a roar like thunder from the cloud-like form, which came near to deafening them, and the roar formed into words. I am Zipacna, whom men cannot slay. There's naught that I fear save the watery way. That rolled rumblingly as thunderings between earth and sky, now loud, now softer, as Zipacna strode from valley to valley. A little later he came in sight again, but far to the north of where they were, then vanishing from their sight into the cleft of the hills where they had battled with the cragmen. Now fearful as was the sight of the giant, yet no fear was in any heart. So having made a meal and rested for a season, without more to do, they set off for the place from which the giant had arisen. It was long before they got there, but at last they stood on the edge of a long and narrow canyon, at the end of which was a mighty pile of bones, not alone of animals, but also of men, and there were human skulls there, and shells of sea crabs, and in and among all these crawled venomous serpents. But most of all were there sea crab shells. While they gazed at this sorrowful sight, there came to them a bent old woman, sad of face and lined and wrinkled, and her talk was more like croaking than human speech. Secret and watchful was she in her manner. To the twin brothers and Bright Eyes, who stood a little apart from the rest of the band, she spoke, asking them, What do ye here, my fine fellows? And why come ye to this place of evil and misery? One of the three answered boldly that they came to slay the giant Zipacna, telling her that he was a thing of evil, and that evil things must be laid low if the world is to be fair. Then, said she, ye are doubtless prepared to die, for in times past many have thought to slay Zipacna, but themselves have been led into feasting and into pleasure and soft living, and so the memory of the good that was intended passed and became less than a dream. Her words they found strange, but she went on to tell them of a land over the hill, where all was fair, and where none had to work, and where the sun shone. There seemed but little meaning in her words, but they made answer, saying, We have but one desire, which is to slay Zipacna for the evil that he has done and must do. As for your land of fine things, if to live there would make us soft and idle, then must our eyes be closed to it. Hearing that, the old woman seemed pleased, and the shadow of a smile touched her face. But her manner changed swiftly, it seemed, for she shot a question at them, which was this. You passed the caves of Cakex, whose bones are now white. Give me, then, of the precious stones that lay in the caves there. And so saying, stretched forth her skinny arm, her hand hollowed to receive gifts. It was not for such toys that we came. We saw, but touched not the precious stones, nor the gold, nor anything that was there. Indeed, to have done so would have hampered us in the doing of that which we set out to do. Thus Hunahpu made reply, and the others nodded. And how did ye escape the apes of the forest? She asked. We stood side by side and met danger. And the men of the crags, how fared ye with them? Bright Eyes answered quietly. Each covered himself and his neighbor as well as he could, and so we came out with whole skins. A silence fell then, the three saying nothing because of the woman's great age, though her words and questions seemed to lack meaning. What she said further was a greater riddle still. It is well done, she told them, and nodded slowly. Now a greater task lies before. It is one in which each of your band must meet dangers separately and to his peril, if eyes are not lit and feet swift. More than that I cannot tell, but go onward until the sea is reached, and there is a lake of water. Whoso touches that water is turned to stone, so take heed. But well indeed it will be if Zipacna is led there. Have you not heard him sing, I am Zipacna, whom men cannot slay, there's naught that I fear save the watery way? Have you not heard that at sunrise? Then she said no more, but turned away. Now, as she took a step, her staff fell from her unsteady hands, and Bright Eyes picked it up and gave it to her. That seemed to open her lips again, for she told them, Hearken one and all. Many are there like swine, who live but to eat, and Zipacna is of that sort. Watch well by the seashore to the end that ye see the things that may lead to his destruction. And there was no more. She passed down the hill and disappeared behind a thorn bush, and at the moment that she vanished from their sight, a white puma leaped out from the other side, by which they saw that she knew of white witcheries. Well, the band lost no time in turning their steps seaward, and although the day was hot and the place inviting, would not rest in a valley through which they passed, a place rich in fruits and soft with silk grass. That evening they came to the sea, and at the foot of a cliff saw a great lake of water, so clear and blue that their eyes could follow, dropping from rock ledge to rock ledge down the slope of the side until they saw the stones and the sand on the bottom. But there were no swaying water weeds, nor was there living thing. Another thing they saw which brought the words of the old woman to their minds, for thrown aside on the beach were hundreds and thousands of sea crab shells, from which they knew that it was the sea crab that Zipacna loved to eat above all things. Now they also saw that by some chance a great tree had fallen, and one end of it rested in the water of the lake, and that end had turned to stone. Another thing they saw, for on the farther side of the lake was a bed of blue-black clay, and the color of it was the color of the shell of a sea crab. So after some thought and some talk, many of the lads went deftly to work, fashioning of the clay of a great sea crab, so great that the like of it was never seen. Others dragged to the lake straight tree trunks, which they laid side by side with the tree already there, and the end of the stick was turned to stone as soon as it touched the water, the rest of the tree changing more slowly. All that night they wrought, making the great crab and setting it on the sloping tree trunks, so that when morning broke, that which they had set out to do was finished, and while it was yet grey dawn, they set off for the place where Zipacna dwelt. But not all the band went. Here a lad was left, a little way off another, then another and another, each hiding behind rock or tussock or thorn bush or tree. So hid, one by one, 50, 100, 200, until at last there were left Balanque, Hinapu, and Bright Eyes. Then at the foot of a hill, Bright Eyes sat down, and Hinapu crouched on the shoulder of another hill that stood alone. So the band being all hidden, it fell out that Balanque alone went to the place where they had met the old woman. He fell to making a great outcry, calling on Zipacna to come forth, and rattling his sword on his shield merrily. "O coward," he called, "come forth and be slain, as was your brother Cacax, whose bones are now scattered and white." In a voice of thunder Zipacna cried, "I am Zipacna, whom men cannot slay. There's naught that I fear but the watery way." Over and over he chanted that, now roaring, now grumbling, as grunts a swine when it would rest. But always Balanque taunted him, calling him a coward giant, telling him that his days were short, and reminding him of the fate of Cacax. At last the slow blood of the giant was on fire, and he rose on his elbow to look. For a time he saw nothing, being slow of sight, and moreover looking too high, little dreaming that his noisy champion was so small. When he saw Belanque at last, his hand shot out, but Belanque was swift, and like the wind fled at top speed to where his brother Hinapu lay. Down dropped Belanque, and up sprang Hinapu, clearing the ground like a deer, with Zipacna in full chase. But the giant little dreaming that he was following a new man. But Hinapu, fresh and rested, did as his brother had done, and sped to the foot of the hill where Bright Eyes lay. Then like an arrow went Bright Eyes to the thorn bush where Huno was, and Huno in his turn darted to the tree where Chimal rested. So also Chimal raced, and each of the band did the same when his turn came, the giant Zipacna following, no more knowing one lad from the other than one ant can be told from its fellow. And in the rear, those who had dropped to hide gathered again, so that 3 companions became 5, 5 became 10, 10 became 50, while over the hill and valley and marsh, through thorn thicket and wooded hill, Zipacna rushed, each lad leading him on his dance, each companion rising from his resting place, ready and swift. And so each of that band met danger alone to the end that all might be safe. At last the merry chase led Zipacna to the cliff, and there below him he saw what he took to be a mighty crab on the tree trunks, ready to drop into the water of the lake. And at the sight of it his mouth watered and his eyes grew large. A touch of his foot sent the crab sliding into the water, and to save it Zipacna thrust out his hand, but he bent over never to straighten again. Solid and firm was he fixed, the crab a crab of stone, his hand a hand of stone. Solid and firm was he fixed, a crouching giant in a crystal lake, where he stands to this day. As for the band of 400, many other valiant deeds did they in the land, but through all never was the thread of their fellowship broken or tangled, and if evil threatened one, then no rest of stay had the others until all was well again. End of the 400.